Today, something that producer Tom's children have never heard of, a landline.
That's right. We're diving deep today into, well, something many of us have just always had,
Yeah.
the traditional home phone. But it's facing this massive change. The old landline network, the PSTN they call it, it's being switched off
Switched off.
and replaced by digital calls, running over your broadband connection. It's a change that's going to affect pretty much everyone who still has a home phone.
Wow. It's almost hard to picture life without that familiar phone socket, isn't it? It's just always been there. So naturally, this big digital shift raises a whole load of questions like, why now? What does it actually mean for us at home?
And are there potential problems we should be aware of?
Exactly. We've gone through a pretty detailed research briefing to really get to grips with this.
And our mission today really is to cut through all the technical stuff and give you a clear picture of this whole digital switchover. We want to explain why it's necessary, how it might affect your day-to-day, and what it means for the UK's communication infrastructure overall. Basically, get the crucial info out there.
Okay, let's jump right in then. The end of the landline era, as you put it. For anyone unfamiliar, what exactly is this public switched telephone network, the PSTN, that's heading off into the sunset?
Well, think of the PSTN as the original phone network. It's the traditional analog system using copper wires that's carried our landline calls for, well, decades. It created a direct electrical connection for your voice. It's been incredibly reliable for a very long time.
So dependable. Why fix what isn't broken? Or rather, why switch it off now? What's the big driver behind this move to digital?
There are a few key things coming together. Firstly, the PSTN network is just old. Really old. Maintaining it is getting more and more expensive, and critically, it's becoming less reliable. Get this. Service incidents, like faults, jumped by 20% in 2023 compared to the year before.
20%.
And the total hours people were without service, that shot up by 60%. That really tells you the system's starting to, well, creak.
60%. That's a massive jump in lost service. Sounds like it's already getting a bit shaky.
It is. A big part of the problem is the equipment itself. A lot of it is way past its expected lifespan. Plus, finding engineers who actually know how to fix this old tech is getting harder.
Ah, the skills gap.
Exactly. And finding spare parts, increasingly difficult on a global scale. It's a bit like trying to keep a classic car running perfectly eventually. The cost and effort just don't add up.
That makes sense. Technology marches on.
It really does. And modern communications, streaming, massive data files, they demand speeds and capacity the old PSTN just wasn't built for. It's analog. It can't cope.
Right.
And with fiber optic cables becoming the standard for broadband delivery, running a whole separate old copper network just for voice calls, it's just really inefficient. Costly duplication, essentially.
So the infrastructure needs to align with how we actually communicate now. Makes sense.
Precisely. And that's where VoIP, Voice over Internet Protocol, comes into the picture. That's the tech that will carry calls over your broadband connection. Your voice becomes digital data traveling over the internet.
Okay, it sounds like a necessary change, but is there anything good in it for us, the consumers? It feels like a bit of an upheaval.
There certainly could be benefits. We might actually get clearer call quality. International calls could potentially become cheaper too. And digital systems allow for more features, things the old analog lines just couldn't support.
Okay, that's something positive. And this isn't just happening here in the UK, is it? Other places are going digital too.
That's right. It's a global trend in telecoms. Countries like Germany, the Netherlands, Switzerland, they're also well down the road of moving to fully digital phone networks.
Okay, so it's the way things are going globally. We understand the why. Now, what about the government and Ofcom? Are they the ones actually making this happen? Is it a government policy?
That's a really important distinction. The switchover itself is being led by the telecoms industry, the providers. It's not a direct government policy or mandate.
Ah, okay.
However, the government definitely recognizes how crucial the phone network is, especially for vulnerable people and services like telecare alarms. So they're not directing it, but they are involved.
So they're keeping a very close eye on things, making sure vulnerable people aren't left behind?
Exactly. They've said they're working closely with the providers and with Ofcom, the regulator, to minimize disruption and protect vulnerable users. They get regular updates on how the migration is progressing.
And different government departments are involved too.
Yes, departments are working to prepare stakeholders, like the companies that make telecare devices, for this change.
Okay, so there's oversight, but I think I read somewhere that some groups felt it wasn't quite joined up enough.
He did. The Local Government Association and the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Digital Communities, They both raise concerns about a perceived lack of central coordination for such a major national change. They stress the need for really clear communication and support.
And where does Ofcom fit in? What's their specific job here?
Ofcom is the regulator for the whole sector. Their key job here is to make sure the phone companies meet their obligations to us, the consumers, during this switch. Their big focus is preventing undue disruption and protecting people from harm.
So they're the referee, making sure the companies play fair.
Essentially, yes. They've issued guidance telling providers how they need to communicate, how to support vulnerable customers, and crucially, how to make sure we can still call emergency services during power cuts.
Power cuts. Yes, we definitely need to talk more about that. But first, you mentioned the industry actually paused the migration process a couple of times. Why was that?
That's right, they did. It was mainly due to concerns about the impact on vulnerable customers. BT, for example, put a pause on their digital voice rollout back in March 2022. This was after some big winter storms really highlighted the problems digital phones could face during power outages.
Ah, right. When the power goes out, the digital phone might too.
Exactly. And then more recently, in December 2023, the government actually had to step in again. This was after some really concerning reports about serious incidents where telecare devices, those personal alarms, failed after the switch.
Oh dear, that sounds serious.
It was. And that led to a much stronger focus on ensuring vulnerable users were safe.
And that's what led to this PSTN charter I've heard about. What did that involve?
Yes, the PSTN Charter. It's basically a set of key commitments agreed in December 2023 by all the big providers, BT, Virgin Media, O2, Sky, TalkTalk, Vodafone, Shell Energy, KCOM. It lays out promises specifically designed to protect vulnerable customers during this move.
What are the main promises they made?
Well, first, they committed not to switch anyone over non-voluntarily unless they're confident they can protect vulnerable people. Big one. Second, no telecare users will be migrated unless there's confirmation they have a working, compatible solution ready.
That's crucial.
Absolutely. They also promised battery backup solutions for emergency calls that go beyond Ofcom's minimum 1-hour requirement, offering a bit more resilience.
Okay, those sound like really important safeguards, addressing those earlier worries.
They are. They're also working together to agree on a common definition of vulnerable meat, so support can be targeted effectively. And they're doing extra checks on people already switched, just in case there were unknown telecare devices out there. There was also a similar network operators charter signed in March 2024 for the companies running the actual infrastructure.
It definitely sounds like a more robust plan is in place now to handle this transition more carefully. Right, let's get to the timing. When is this all actually happening? What's the final deadline?
The absolute final deadline for the old PSTN network to be completely switched off is the end of January 2027. That's the cutoff.
January 2027. Okay. It was meant to be sooner, wasn't it?
It was. The original target was December 2025, but those pauses we talked about, mainly due to the concerns around vulnerable customers, pushed the date back. Gives everyone a bit more breathing room.
Right. So what about for individual customers? When will I get the call, so to speak?
Well, the specific timing for you depends entirely on who your phone provider is. They're the ones managing their own customer migrations. They should contact you well in advance of needing you to do anything.
But this isn't something just starting, is it? It's already happening.
Oh, yes, the migration is definitely well underway. Ofcom estimated back in December 2024 that around 5.2 million homes still had traditional PSTN lines. That was about 27% of the total.
So nearly 3/4 had already switched by then.
Well, in the year leading up to June 2024, about 1.8 million residential customers were migrated over to digital services. So yes, a significant chunk has already moved.
How are most people actually making this switch? Does it just happen?
It happens in a few ways. Often, it's when you sign up for a new broadband and phone deal. Nearly all new packages now are digital only. In some places, like new housing estates built with only fiber, you just can't get an old analog line anymore.
Ah, okay.
And since September 2023, they actually stopped selling new analog lines to new customers altogether.
So the option is disappearing anyway, gradually.
Exactly. Then you have what they call managed or provider-led migrations. That's where the company proactively moves existing customers over. That actually accounted for over half the migrations in the last year or so.
What about BT specifically? They're obviously huge. What's their approach been?
Well, after that pause in 2022, they restarted their digital voice rollout in April 2023. They're doing it region by region with local awareness campaigns. But importantly, BT has committed not to actively migrate certain groups until they figured out their specific support needs.
Which groups are those? The more vulnerable ones?
Yes. That includes telecare users, people over 70, those who only have a landline, no broadband, people in areas with no mobile signal at all, and anyone who's already told BT they have additional needs or vulnerabilities.
That seems like a sensible, cautious approach for those groups.
Generally, yes,
Hmm.
although it wasn't entirely smooth sailing. There's a group called Silver Voices, representing older people, who initially supported BT's plans, but they withdrew their support in August 2023
Why was that?
because BT started migrating some existing broadband customers, over 70 in the East Midlands. Silver Voices felt this went against earlier assurances.
Oh, okay. How did BT respond?
BT said they were initially targeting specific over 70s in urban areas who already had broadband and barely used their landline for calls anyway. Their argument was these people were already digitally engaged. It just shows how tricky managing this across millions of diverse customers really is.
It really does. Now, the big question everyone asks,
Yeah.
money. What's going to happen to the price? Are our phone bills going to shoot up because of this digital switch?
Okay, so the actual pricing is up to the individual companies. It's a commercial decision. However, both BT and Virgin Media O2 have publicly said their customers won't pay more for their basic landline service just because it's moving to digital tech.
Well, that's good to hear, but is there anything stopping them from hiking prices later? Any checks?
Ofcom doesn't set the prices directly, no, but they do monitor the market very closely. They publish reports on affordability and have powers to intervene if they think the market isn't providing fair value.
Like they did with BT's landline-only prices a while back.
Exactly. BT voluntarily agreed to cut prices for landline-only customers and cap future rises after Ofcom reviewed it. And the government has also weighed in, saying quite clearly they don't expect providers to use the switchover as an excuse for unreasonable price hikes or upgrade costs.
Okay, so the hope is costs won't jump unfairly. Now, what do we actually need to do? What are the practical steps for customers?
For most people, Ofcom expects the migration to be fairly straightforward with minimal effort. For many, the biggest change will simply be plugging their existing telephone handset into the back of their broadband router instead of the old wall socket.
Ah, just plugging it into a different box. Sounds simple enough for broadband users. And can we keep our phone number?
Yes, in the vast majority of cases, you should definitely be able to keep your existing phone number. Always good to double check with your provider, but that's the standard practice.
And if we need new kit, like a new phone or router?
If new equipment is needed, maybe a compatible handset or a new router, or even the broadband connection itself if you don't have one, your provider will usually supply that as part of the switch.
Okay, so for many, it's just replugging.
Hmm.
But you mentioned situations where people do need to be more proactive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's really crucial that you contact your provider if you have other devices using the old phone line. Think telecare alarms, maybe a monitored burglar alarm, even an old fax machine if you still have one.
Why contact the phone provider about those?
Well, you need to check with the device provider if it's compatible with the new digital service.
Mm-hmm.
But you should also inform your phone provider that you have these devices so they are aware when managing your switch.
Right. That makes sense. 2 points of contact. What else requires proactive steps?
If you rely entirely on your landline for emergencies and wouldn't be able to call 999 in a power cut, maybe you have no mobile or no signal where you live, you absolutely must talk to your provider about backup options.
We'll come back to power cuts in detail, but that's vital. Anything else?
Yes. If you have any disabilities or other needs that mean you might need help with the actual installation, setting up the router, plugging things in, let your provider know well in advance so they can arrange assistance.
So it's really about knowing your own situation and telling your provider. Does Ofcom suggest any specific questions we should be asking them?
Yes, they have a helpful list. Ask, what exactly do I need to do? Will it work in a power cut? And what backup is there for emergency calls? How do I check my other devices are compatible? And will my current phone handset work, or do I need a new one?
Those are really practical questions, essential ones, actually. Now, what about the people who don't have internet at all right now? How does this affect them?
A really important group.
Yeah.
As we said, VoIP needs broadband. Back in 2018, Ofcom estimated about 3% of UK households only had a landline, no internet.
It's a small percentage, but still a lot of people.
Yeah.
Will they be forced to get a full broadband package they don't want or need?
Not necessarily. The good news is VoIP itself doesn't need much bandwidth, maybe only about 0.5 milli apiece. The government has said that BT and KCM in Hull, will offer digital landline options without needing customers to take out a separate full broadband contract just for browsing or streaming.
So they'll provide a sort of broadband light just for the phone.
That seems to be the plan. Ofcom says providers will supply the necessary broadband connection just to run the VoIP phone service. And importantly, if that's all you're using it for, you shouldn't have to pay extra for the VoIP service itself, just your normal landline charge.
That sounds like a fair way to handle it for those who genuinely only want a voice line. What about the physical setup in their homes?
BT has talked about a temporary solution, or a pre-digital phone line, for these customers. It sounds like they might keep the copper wire going to the house, but connected to the digital network at the exchange instead of the old PSTN. So inside the house, it might still look and feel much like the current setup.
That's good to know there are plans for landline-only users. Now, we touched on other devices using the PSTN earlier, alarms, telecare. Can we dig into that a bit more? What kind of things are we talking about?
Sure. Beyond standard phones, it's things like monitored security alarms, burglar alarms, personal telecare alarms, like fall detectors for the elderly or vulnerable, sometimes even traffic light controls, CCTV systems, and yes, those older fax machines.
So anyone with any of those needs to take action.
Definitely.
Right.
They absolutely must contact the provider of that specific device, the alarm company, the telecare service, to check if their equipment will work over a digital phone line or if it needs adapting or replacing.
Adapting. What does that involve?
Sometimes an existing analog device can be made to work using something called an analog telephone adapter, or ATA. Some telecare providers mention this as an option, and sometimes the phone company might supply one. But you must check with the device provider first.
But we also heard those worrying reports about telecare failures.
Yes, sadly, the government acknowledged completely unacceptable incidents. There were reports, highlighted by an FT investigation, concerning 2 deaths of Virgin Media O2 customers, where telecare devices allegedly failed post-switch, though the government urged caution about attributing direct cause while investigations were ongoing. It's incredibly serious.
Just awful. That really underlines the risks.
It does. And that's why DSIT and the Department of Health launched that joint Telecare National Action Plan in February 2025. It sets out clear steps to protect telecare users.
What are the main aims of that plan again?
4 key things. 1, no migration unless a working compatible telecare solution is confirmed first. 2, phasing out old analog telecare devices. 3, ensuring users and providers know what to do. And 4, making sure everyone involved collaborates to keep people safe.
A vital plan. And wasn't there a call to stop selling the old analog ones altogether?
Yes, the APPG on digital communities called for a ban on selling new analog telecare devices to prevent future problems and push towards digital-ready solutions.
And this isn't just about homes, is it? Businesses and infrastructure, too.
Correct. Many businesses still rely on PSTN lines, and as we mentioned, some public infrastructure like traffic lights. The Crown Commercial Service is working with OpenReach to get the public sector ready. And that PSTN Critical National Infrastructure Charter from November 2024 aims to ensure essential services migrate smoothly and securely.
It really is a far-reaching change. Okay, let's tackle the power cut issue head-on. This is a huge concern for many. How does the digital switch impact calls during an outage?
This is absolutely critical. Unlike the old system, digital phone services need mains power in your house to work. So if the power goes off at home, your digital landline is dead, unless you have some form of battery backup.
That's the big difference, isn't it? Old phones often kept working because the power came from the exchange.
Exactly. The PSTN line itself carried the power from the exchange, which often had its own backup generators. But your digital phone relies on your broadband router, and your router needs mains electricity in your home. No power at home, no router, no digital phone line.
So what must the phone companies do to ensure we can still call 999 or 112 in a power cut? Is there a requirement?
Yes, there's a strict regulatory obligation. Providers must ensure customers have uninterrupted access to emergency calls, even during a power cut. This applies fully to the new VoIP services.
How are they supposed to do that? What solutions must they offer?
Ofcom's guidance from 2018 says providers must offer at least one solution, allowing emergency calls for a minimum of 1 hour during a power outage at home. This solution needs to be suitable for the customer and provided free of charge to those deemed dependent on their landline.
What kind of solution?
Typically, it's a battery backup unit, like a UPS for the router. In some specific cases, maybe providing a basic mobile phone could be an alternative if the customer has no other means.
Okay, but only 1 hour. Hasn't that been questioned? Power cuts can last much longer.
You're right, it has been questioned. In that parliamentary debate in December 2023, MPs asked if 1 hour was really enough. The minister said it's a minimum and backups might last longer. But crucially, the government has asked Ofcom to review that 1 hour guideline.
A review seems sensible, especially after those big storms a few years back.
Definitely. Storm Arwen, Storm Eunice in winter 2021-22, they really exposed the vulnerability. Lengthy power cuts knocked out digital lines and mobile masts in some areas, leaving people totally cut off.
Were lessons learned from that?
Yes. Reports are published by the Industry Government Group, ECRRG, and by Ofcom, looking at resilience and response. One recent outcome from September 2024 is updated Ofcom guidance, recommending new broadband street cabinets get battery backup lasting at least 4 hours, which should help network resilience.
4 hours for the cabinet is better. So for anyone worried or needing help with all this, where do they turn? What support is available?
The main support channel is your own phone or broadband provider. They are responsible for helping their customers through the switch. If you have concerns, questions, or think you need extra help, contact them first. Their number should be on your bill.
And what should we expect from them in terms of support?
Ofcom expects them to give plenty of notice before the switch and offer help with the process itself. That could mean, for example, sending an engineer out to help install the router, especially for older people or those with disabilities who might find it difficult.
People need to know what they're entitled to expect.
Absolutely. The Communications Consumer Panel has done research on this and made recommendations about clear communication and identifying people's needs. And remember that PSTN charter commitment. That led to specific industry guidance published in November 2024 on defining and supporting vulnerable customers during the migration.
Who falls into that vulnerable category again?
It includes people at higher risk of harm or major problems due to the switch. So telecare users, people totally dependent on their landline, and those vulnerable because of age, illness, or disability.
And providers have to proactively help these people.
Yes. Ofcom's general rules on treating vulnerable customers fairly apply here. Providers should try to identify them, offer different ways to communicate, work with carers if needed, and actively tell people about the extra help available. And as you mentioned, there's more info on general affordability in a separate library briefing, too.
This has been really comprehensive. It's clear this is a massive change, necessary perhaps, but with real challenges, especially around protecting vulnerable people and ensuring everyone understands what's happening and what they need to do.
It really is. It's a fundamental shift in our communications landscape. It promises upgrades, yes, but it absolutely requires careful handling to make sure nobody, particularly those most reliant on the old system, gets left behind or put at risk. And maybe just take a moment to think about your own situation. How reliant are you on that landline? Do you have other devices plugged into it? Have you spoken to your provider yet about your switch? And crucially, what would a power cut mean for your ability to call for help? Worth considering as the old landline era draws to a close.
Check out the episode notes to follow up this discussion. Find us on social media at Bench Report UK and get in touch with any issues you want us to make an episode about. Take care.